And so you just heard from some food tech and synthetic biology companies, and now we will have companies focused in the materials and textile space. So, Chewy, you're already up. You're already queued.
Oh, I'm so excited. I got so much screen time today. So thank you. I'm Chewy. I'm one of the co-founders and the CEO of Wearwell. It's nice to meet you all. So at Wearwell, our mission is to make the fashion industry compatible with nature. And so what our team does is we follow nature's blueprints to function to create regenerative textile fibers that can plug and play in today's fashion and textile industry. Our team engineers microbes to produce our designer proteins to create color and performance without plastics and water pollution. So we're still very early stage. We're at TRL4. We have a patent that we've co-patented, with Columbia University and the Fashion Institute of Technology, and these are some of our more recent prototype fibers. So really, ultimately, as a company, our value proposition is greenhouse gas reduction through the use of renewable raw materials. We're eliminating the dyeing and finishing stages of production through structure-based color and functionality. And finally, we're really looking at the entire life cycle of a product addressing microplastic pollution by thinking about the end of life of our products at the beginning of their lives. So we're really designing our fibers to degrade into building blocks for healthy ecosystems. So this is my amazing team. Theanne and Valentina are in the back here today. Our backgrounds, we're a unique team. We're all women, and we have backgrounds in material science, chemical engineering, biomedical engineering, and textile development and marketing. We've gained a lot of traction in the industry, and most recently we joined the New Lab Founder Fellowship. We're really excited at NYC EDC, and we just received the L by Polestar Design Towards Zero award, so it's really exciting. And we're just announcing today that we closed our fundraising round, so thank you. Really excited about that. So Wearwell was really born in New York City. We started as a biodesign project at the Fashion Institute of Technology. We got a small grant through Theanne Chiros to bring our research over to Columbia University. During the pandemic, we were able to use GenSpace's labs, which are right down the street. And then most recently, last fall, we moved into the Downstate University's incubator space, Tech at 710, which has been an amazing home for us. And we're part of the Startup New York program. We use CUNY ARC's CAP program to help us do a lot of our characterization. I feel like everyone's here. I'm so glad I called you all out. I'm sorry. And we also use LifeSci NYC interns. So we're really excited to be here, and I think that New York's such a great place to be a tech company today. That's it for me. Thank you. Oh, sorry. I don't know how to...
Cool. Yeah. Thank you so much for having me here today. I'm CEO and co-founder of TomTest, and at TomTest we building a next-gen innovative material that make out of waste for the textile industry. So the waste here we're making is seaweed waste and mushroom, and we're really fascinated about a molecule called chitosan. So chitosan is the second most upward involved polymer on Earth, just behind cellulose. So why waste? Why seaweed waste? So let me take you to a little journey to the south tipping point of Vietnam, Cà Mau. So this region, Cà Mau, have a massive 740,000 acre upstream farming land, and we are so famous on farming shrimp and other crops and rice. But because of climate change, so it leading to sea level rise. So as the result, a lot of salt water that invading to the land, and the whole industry and the whole region had to pivot to farming shrimp. And Vietnam, we are one of the 3 countries that is exporting seafood. So a lot of culture doesn't consuming the shell. So end up like a lot of tons and tons of seaweed waste that wasted every year back in our backyard. And it's unbelievable because this is not a local issues actually happen everywhere around the globe. So people want to do something about it. They want to utilize this waste, otherwise it's going to contaminate the environment and their health. So for us, our big question is, what if we can transform this waste into something that values? Because at Tomtest, we don't believe in anything at waste, and that is our ethos that we're living at Tomtest. In nature, they know something at waste, and everything that comes down to the earth is become a nutrient. So they cannot hear. Okay. It's better now? Okay. Okay, I'm back. So basically, like, we want to utilize this waste into something that have values on longevity. And we did it. We turning waste to the new luxury. We collaborate with top designer in the world, and we have the first collaboration with Peter DeO for New York Fashion Week. And soon after, we have new collaboration with Gribesta and Dauphinette for London Fashion Week. We want to offer these new beautiful materials that are good for the people and good for the planet. With the vision that this material can go beyond leather. So I'd like to pass it to our CSO Ross to continue the story.
Okay, so I'm Ross. I'm the science guy at Tomtex. I wanted to start with an odd photo here. This is actually a photo of Henry Ford hitting a soybean plastic car with a sledgehammer to prove how strong it is, right? And I bring this up just to point out that it's easy to talk about these materials or to think about these materials as if they're kind of the far future of tech, right? There's some pipe dream, and this is just not true, right? This stuff is actually quite old, and in reality, it's the way that we've made materials for the vast majority of human existence. And really, the time that we've been using plastics and using synthetics is a momentary blip, hopefully, on that journey. And so what we're interested in doing is learning how nature has made materials. Nature continues to make materials because nature is quite good at this, a lot better than we are in many different cases. The analogy here, right, is a tree is mechanically doing something actually way, way, way more sophisticated than literally anybody on the planet, any human on the planet can do right now. Right? If you take a piece of aluminum that's in an Airbus A380, and you look at that really, really small, that piece of aluminum looks like a piece of aluminum, right? But if you look at a tree, what a tree is doing is taking sugar and turning it into a chain of cellulose, and then turning that into cellulose fibrils, and then turning that into cellulose fibers, and then wrapping that around cells, and then making a vasculature, and then making a tree. At every order of magnitude of scale, from nanometers to meters, you have a totally different architecture operating. And so that means that tree is able to take sugar and sunlight and make balsa wood, which is twice the specific strength of aircraft-grade aluminum. And that plane is a bunch of stuff you dug out of the ground and absolutely crammed energy into until it was vaguely plane-shaped and did what you wanted it to do. What we have to figure out how to do is make the airplane, but like the tree. And that sounds very silly coming from a company that at the moment is making leather, but this is the journey, right? You start with something where the economics work. You start with something that has a cultural valence, because in many cases this is as much a cultural problem as it is a techno-economic one. And then you move on up the sort of value chain, you move on up sophistication as you learn from that process. And so, whoops, what's happened here? One slide, please. Okay, there we go. So the way we're doing that is a couple of core principles. The first is we use waste as inputs, right? So these are things that do damage in the environment if you don't do something with them. Shrimp shells are a great example of this. Shrimp shells often end up in landfills, produce methane, produce algae blooms when they end up in the ocean. But it goes a little bit beyond that. We use no plastics, which is reasonable. We also use no petrochemicals at all. So not just nothing that came out of the ground, but nothing that was built from stuff that came out of the ground, which is like most of industrial chemistry. This is actually the hard one. But you get some stuff for free if you do it that way. You tend to get biodegradability for free because stuff has already evolved to eat all this. And because you're sort of building from the ground up, you get to produce materials that have a huge range of aesthetic and functional properties. And so that's really what we're interested in. We're interested in telling a story about what materials can be. We're starting with something that works for where it is now. But the vision is a new material substrate, right? A new way of looking at the way we actually build physical things in the real world. Learning from those principles, that show up in a tree that are actually, all around us all the time.
Yeah, thanks. So before I start, I just wanted to thank Nancy and all the other organizers for hosting us here. My name's Adam Juliana, and I'm the co-founder and CEO of Chemfinity Technologies. At Chemfinity, we're designing advanced polymer materials that can be used in the form of sorbent and membrane filters, and these are extremely good at capturing specific molecules from complex mixtures. So these are things like critical minerals from different waste streams, like electronics or mine tailings, things that traditionally cause lots of pollution, or also water. So trying to do things like desalinating water, reusing water from wastewaters. And so to give a little backstory for how we came to be, my co-founder, Ever Velasquez, and I did our PhDs in chemical engineering at the University of California, Berkeley. And while we were there, we helped develop this class of materials that I was just alluding to, that we were really fortunate to get a lot of encouragement to go and spin out a company, try to scale this up, try to commercialize it, address a lot of these different pollution problems. And so we were one of those unique companies that came from the Bay to New York. And I could go on and on about why we did that, and that's something that I'd be happy to chat about anyone with. But long story short, we saw a really exciting ecosystem here that honestly, objectively, was grown by a lot of people in this room. So it's really exciting to be here. So we were fortunate to be awarded a Breakthrough Energy Fellowship, which is a program under Bill Gates, which gives our whole runway until September of 2024, so all non-diluted capital. And so we're, just for context, we're raising our next round in early 2024. And so we're right now at Tech at 710 with Wearable, actually. I believe Eva will be on the next panel talking about that, actually. And again, what we're doing is mostly focused on the critical minerals recovery space. Our materials can uniquely recover water and purify water at the same time as capturing these different types of molecules, which is one of our big value propositions. And within our toolkit, so within our IP portfolio, for example, we can also tune these materials to capture different types of gases. This isn't our primary focus right now, but this is something that our platform can pretty easily do. So capturing things like CO2 from different point sources or from things like air for different climate change mitigation. I'd be happy to chat with anyone either on this panel or elsewhere about what it's like to be a materials company and a chemistry company and a clean tech company in the New York City ecosystem. We're uniquely not one of the bio-focused companies. So it's been a great experience so far here. I'd also be happy to chat with anyone about some of these experiences within incubators and fellowships, and also again why we even chose to move to New York rather than other places. We actually explored over a dozen different cities before we moved to New York City. And just wanted to say quick, just to give a little bit more info on what we're actually doing. Because we are technical founders, I like to approach this from a periodic table. We can tune our materials to capture one of these specific elements that are lit up. So we have over a dozen unique materials that are based on our same platform that almost like tune in molecular Legos. You can choose different types of chemical building blocks to tune the material to be very selective for one of these metals. Something like platinum or palladium, some type of precious metal that's needed for, say, fuel cells or other types of clean tech operations. Also pollutants like chromium-6, which is a carcinogen. And then again, different gas separations like CO2 or oxygen. So thanks for your time. We're focused on critical mineral recovery at the moment, and happy to chat with anyone about that.
Hi, everyone. My name is Aaron Nesser. I am one of the co-founders and a former CTO and CEO of a company called Keel Labs, which used to be called AlgaeNet, which was originally called BioEsters back in 2016 when we won the first Biodesign Challenge. I don't work there anymore. But I think up on stage here, my experience is unique because my company left New York after searching for about a year and a half for a new home to build our, what was it, like $5 million pilot facility. So we, after like an extensive search in the metropolitan area, ended up moving to the Raleigh-Durham Triangle and built out 15,000 square feet, which we're piloting production now. So the thing that Keel Labs make, that I used to make, is a textile fiber for the fashion industry that is made out of seaweed. The idea for this is based in this like really simple idea that I call just-in-time degradability. And you can think about it like, I've got this shoe. It's made out of foam and a textile. There's some metal, there's some glass beads that are reflective on there. It's all these different materials that are glued together. And I got my start in the recycling world and organics, composting here in New York City. It's, building that program from the beginning. But something like this, if I try to recycle it, it's just like, sorry, you're out of luck. And when I was studying product design at Pratt, that really disappointed me. So didn't want to just like work with the materials that were out there today. And so I said like, well, I guess I'll have to make my own, which is what I did with my co-founders, starting with bioesters and now moving on to Keel Labs, which is worth like tens of millions of dollars today. We did a $13 million Series A about a year ago. But so I'm here in New York. Why am I here in New York? So
Don't steal my question, Aaron.
About 2 weeks ago, I guess, started a consultancy, and I'm now working with some different biomaterials companies, doing a couple things. One on business development, and also on accelerating the fundraising process, which was something we learned a lot about starting at Keel Labs. And then I also have one little, I guess, fun project that I've been working on with Jess and back. It's called biodesignjobs.com, which is for folks that are interested in biodesign, maybe have been working in a different field for a long time and want to get in. So it's a great resource that we've just kind of built for the community, and if folks are interested in working in the field, that is a okay place to start.
Thanks, everyone. And so, Adam, maybe we will start with you, since you said you have many, many reasons why you chose New York after an extensive search. And so maybe if you could just detail one or two of them. And I think if I did my research correctly, you are one of the newest companies, so kind of maybe just starting out. So again, given that this panel is called Growing the Industry, would love to hear some of your thoughts and reasons as to why New York.
Sure. So yes, correct, we are one of the newest companies. We just spun out in the end of last summer. So we actually moved here in October. It was really a lot of different reasons. Honestly, the government of New York City, among a lot of different types of organizations, is providing a lot of different types of resources, especially in clean tech. So NYC, LifeSci NYC is a program that I know a lot of the companies here have gotten some great interns with. There's a lot of different types of like tax credits and whatnot for people trying to build, which isn't as much what New York City was originally known for, but again, because of a lot of the companies in this space, it's really becoming growing. Kind of a lot of the reasons also from what the last panel said with the concentration of investors, of talent, and not as many companies yet as, say, Boston or the Bay Area. You get kind of like a lot of the same benefits of one of those areas. I actually think in many cases more benefits. And then also, it was also partially personal. So I'm from Pennsylvania, Eastern Pennsylvania. My fiance is as well. Ever is from Florida, so at least closer. So it's also important to be close to people that sometimes need your support.
Thank you. And so, Chewy, my next question is for you, and if you allow me to read this prepared question I have for you so I don't get it wrong.
Sure.
Because I want to remind you of an answer you gave in a previous interview, which is that you said that a challenge in the fashion industry is that there isn't one framework with sustainability goals and definitions folks can rally around. And I wondered what you think it would take for a system like that to be built? Or what can the fashion industry learn from biotech or vice versa?
That's a really good question. I mean, I think a lot of work is being done in the industry to create that set of standards. I think the Textile Exchange is an amazing group that is creating that framework for us all to kind of strive towards, like, this is what we consider to be sustainable. These are the things that you need to evaluate when you're choosing your materials. I'm not sure what they can learn from biotech. It's not hard. I mean, we all need to learn from nature. So I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, and then so actually that's the exact question I had for you, Ewan. Why was it so important? I know, Ross, you gave a really lovely description of, why we should be looking at nature, but for you specifically, why do you think it is so pertinent that nature is involved in some of the solutions that we are building, especially around, let's say, materials and textiles?
Yeah, I think that, like as the designer, thank you. So I have a custom microphone now. So basically, I think what we learn from nature is we have to reconnect and rebuild our relationship with material again. So far, like 60% of the material that we use is from fossil fuel base. And as a former designer and textile designer, it's very frustrating for me to choose the material like a few years ago. There's no such thing as sustainable material that we can have accessible and affordable for all of us to use. So that's why I'm here in New York as well. It's a lot of fashion brand here. It's the capital of fashion here in New York. And for me, it's very convenient for us to develop the material when we can go and knock the door and show the material for the designer and introduce that we can do much more than what the material we have right now. So I still see like a big gap between sustainability in fashions with brand. So that is something that we as the community try to build at this point.
Yeah, absolutely. And Ross, I know you and I have had some small conversations around this, but as the scientist for Tomtex, and maybe when we're in the labs working on things on such small scales, now you have to think about scaling your company and scaling your product. So can you share some thoughts around what you're thinking about how to do that in the material and fashion space?
Yeah, sure. I mean, that's scale isn't king. Like, you have to get the fundamentals right first, but it is necessary. Right? It doesn't matter if you're working on this problem if you can't get it out to people that are actually going to use it. The way we've approached this is we have our facility, we're in the Brooklyn Navy Yard. We sort of rolled it from a concrete box, like it's totally from scratch, and we're building it. I think leanness would be the way that you sort of talk about this. We make a lot of things ourselves, is what that means in practice. A lot of instrumentation and a lot of equipment ourselves. But there are ceilings to that. In some cases, these are like practical ceilings. The equipment is just too expensive. In some cases, they are sort of developmental ceilings where there's a precision requirement that's actually difficult to do at bench top, but it's easier to do at full scale. So for those folks, we've worked with contract and toll manufacturers throughout the U.S. We're in part of our value prop is basically that going from the way you actually make large amounts of our material is pretty drop-in for existing coating technologies. So that for me is just a series of weird phone calls where you talk to people that normally make adhesive labels and explain to them that you want to make something very, very different from adhesive labels, and they kind of ask you some weird questions, and then you can figure out what you want. But there's some critical wrinkles in here. The first is we want to eventually run our own facility, so it's as much about knowledge transfer as it is just executing on the contract. And so finding people that are willing to talk with you and willing to explain things is super important there. And then there are questions about it needs to be pretty nearby. You need to be able to go visit. You have to these have to be accessible. It can't be something you just fire and forget a pint, and then 6 months later you get a report back. It can't work that way. So this is something that isn't immediately locally available in New York. There's maybe a couple people in the state, but we're not working with them. So we've had to go beyond that. But if you're careful with this, you can manage. And then, of course, you eventually want to bring this in-house. What that looks like for us is probably siting close to like waste material production. So this would be probably siting in Vietnam, right, where we're getting a bunch of this shrimp shell waste. But we want to understand the process enough that we can go find places where other waste streams exist, both for this product and future products, and work there too. And so that's about finding concentrations of waste. This is a central challenge in waste-based materials, is that if you're trying to do it like post-consumer, which is sort of the recycling mindset that most people think about, that's basically impossible. You're like a waste sorting facility plus like Amazon last mile delivery. Like, it just doesn't work. So you have to find concentrations of these materials that already exist and then tap off from those. And that also, you get some great benefits in terms of like minimizing your carbon scores because everything is localized. And maybe helping to rebuild towards a model of both a bioeconomy and a material economy that is a little bit more localized and circularizes industries in a way that is, like, I don't want to sort of rag on globalization per se, but the notion that you can gain particularly carbon efficiency by concentrating things in particular places.
And so, Aaron, I know you said that AlgaeNet, now Keel Labs, is not in New York, but you are in New York, and you're working, I wrote it down, Keep Earth Company.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, no, it's great. So what are the things that you're seeing in the clean tech space or in the material space that is exciting to you now that you are, I don't want to say on the outside of things, but now that you've kind of already established a company before and maybe now have the time to really kind of look to the landscape and see what others are working on?
Oh, well, that's a long answer.
Okay, well, I'll give you 2 minutes.
I mean, I think that, most of the companies that I would talk about are either on stage with me or have been on this stage today. Short answer. I think, though, that there's so much innovation happening in materials, and so many companies also that, are not, or ideas that are not getting onto the stage. The trajectory for new materials can be decades. And I think everyone here is sort of, and Keel Labs included, has done a lot to buck that trend. One of our advisors at Keel, he took a technology that was developed originally in the 1940s. It took 40, 50 years to even start commercialization on it, and then another 2 decades before it was commercialized. So I think there just are so many materials that are, maybe they're in a lab and you just haven't heard about them, that are just incredibly exciting. Also, combining AI, machine learning with polymer chemistry. I think no one's really done it in a way that has been practical yet. There's so many projects that have gotten really close. That's an area I'm really excited about.
And so, to go back to this point about materials that maybe haven't even been realized yet, or just kind of sitting somewhere in a lab and no one's kind of like plucked them out and been like, hey, could be a good tool or technology to solve for problem X. Maybe I mentioned on the panel before, but now we have this executive order from the president that says like biomanufacturing, biotechnology, bioeconomy, we're going to put money and talent and resources behind really moving this forward. So I feel like, 10 or 15 years ago, there wasn't this almost like trifecta of people working on it. And what I mean by that is like the government, the industry, and academia. But I wonder, is there someone or a community or a group missing from that conversation? And now that the government is involved, does that mean things will go slower or faster? Or, what are your thoughts kind of around where the material space is going?
This is part of the reason why we're interested in the fashion space. I think I've talked about this a little bit in that little intro, but I think some of the things that happen with, Monsanto or BASF or somebody comes up with some bioplastic in the 40s, right? And it just sort of sits there. And in part it sits there because it's like pitched to industry for industry, and there's this disconnect between like the possible chemistries out there and any of that actually trickling down to like a consumer. So in some cases it's not totally clear, like the consumer may be willing to pay for this, but because they haven't demonstrated that they pay for this, because it hasn't existed in, because no one has like connected those economic dots, you can't go to a board and say, look, like let's really push on this class of chemistry because like the sink is here. I think that's one of the interesting reasons why I think a bunch of people are sort of circularizing around fashion, is that if you can tell that story, and you can tell that story in like this culturally loaded way, in this way that's like both intimate to people's expressions and to how they carry themselves and how they think about themselves in the world, then maybe you can kind of demonstrate that draw a little bit and connect a vision of the future and sort of incept that into the mind of the public in a way that then feeds back and generates demand and actually shows off that people, like, the model of the consumer for me in 10 years is that this is just assumed. Like, it's assumed that the material is sustainable. And I don't really think that everybody's really caught on to that. And so if you want to bring somebody else into that conversation, saying, look, this is existential. Like, this is the way it must go from just like a pure, hard warming perspective, but also from a, like, look, this is the way business is going to go too. I think you can make a more compelling case. I mean, New York is a great example of this, right? This is super Venice, right? In 50 years, if we don't get this under control, the city's underwater, right? This is not a joke, right? Like, this shit will happen. Like, this here right now will be underwater, like, if it's at 2.5 degrees. So making that clear to people and making that clear to industry and making that both a, this is a shitty way to say this, but a carrot and a stick, right? That like this is what can happen, but this is the vision of the future that you can present with a material like this, with the, with this sort of larger class of materials. Maybe can be convincing, can help push this stuff forward.
Can I add something?
Of course.
I think that what's going to be really big, and can you hear me? You guys can hear me? What's going to be really big and what's going to drive, biomanufacturing and all these industries forward is also, the diversity and points of view that are involved in all of these projects, like that cross-industry collaboration. I remember when I first met Adam, I actually got really excited about his technology because it's like, oh man, like those membranes, they can be used for dye stuffs in the textile industry, and that's a huge problem, right? Like, and Adam and Emma were like, what do you mean? Maybe, but like but like kind of that diverse perspective and thinking about things from different points of view, I think is what's going to take all of these new technologies out of labs and find like actual commercial applications for them.
And which I think is a theme that's run through a lot of the panels today, making sure that there's a diverse group of people asking the questions, building the solutions, and then, who are you actually building it for? And so I do want to leave, we have a few more minutes, and I wanted to make sure I left some time if there were questions from the audience. Hi.
So I love all the ideas of today and entrepreneurism and new materials. I'm wondering who's doing work on recycling. Like, we all put our recycle bins out onto the street, and sometimes it's a one-way stream, and sometimes you're supposed to separate them out. And I have this pessimistic point of view that I have no idea really what's happening. Any of that isn't really sustainable. Yes, we all feel better if we say we're recycling. But who on this panel or in this audience is working on, like, the day that we put stuff out on the curb, we know it's being recycled? I mean, I know we're talking today more about, like, get away from even having to recycle. But is anyone on this panel or in the audience working on the current recycling problem?
So I have one project I'm working on that I can't talk about yet that is working on that. But to your point, I think your pessimism is warranted.
Yeah, that's realism.
I was going to say, I don't think it's,
10, 12 years ago when I was working on organics recycling, the office I was a part of also did textile recycling and education around metal, glass, plastic, just like comprehensive recycling in New York. And this was one of the reasons I went back to school for design is because I kept looking at all these different products and the energy, the incredible energy that went into sorting and, attempting to refabricate them, and just the level of, it's like the economics and the human fallibility that that prevents successful recycling. And so one of the ideas that I think about a lot is just about entropy, is that as we make more and more different products, more materials, more combinations of materials in recyclable plastics, that process gets more and more complicated and our success rate goes lower. On the other hand, composting, biodigestion, biological recycling systems, they operate like at the lowest common denominator. So anything that is compostable, biodegradable, well, I shouldn't say biodegradable, anything that is compostable or like degradable by organisms can go into the same, the same bin, I'll say. And you don't really need human intervention to make it into something else. Like, it works without us. So that's why I like biomaterials and biodegradable materials.
There was a paper like last couple of weeks or something that was the recycling process itself generates a huge amount of microplastics.
Yes.
Because the sorting, right, is this mechanically abrasive, whatever, right? So, and it was some sort of astonishing number that it was coming out in the wastewater of these facilities, right? Plastics are hard, like they're really interesting, but
One
yeah.
piece of uplifting news might be, and these are numbers that I ran looking at Department of Sanitation data, is that right now and for this year, we are projected to recycle and compost more organics than plastics in New York City. So there's one point of progress.
But that's because I think there's a new compost program where
Yeah.
you can get a brown pail if you just
Yeah,
ask for one.
That's brown pails in Queens.
Nice.
Yeah.
Okay, Ewan, I feel like you might have wanted to say one last thing.
Yeah, I just kind of like want to add a little bit on the optimistic of recycling, because like a lot of the time in the textile industry is more so like downcycle, it's not like upcycle. So we talk about waste colonialism as well. Like a lot of the waste that maybe is a waste, not a waste, on way like shipping back into like global south, and we have to do something about it. So that's why like I'm on board with everyone here for like biodegradable materials, as well as like a lot of innovation that we try to do, upcycling the waste as well. But
Well, thank you all for, sorry, Adam.
Oh, I'll just say real quick, we at Chemfinity are looking at electronics recycling, so not plastics, but everyone here in either their pocket or their hand has many different types of metals that are pretty hard to separate. They're all very similar in a lot of their compositions. And so we're trying to be able to recycle things like photovoltaics, like phones, like printed circuit boards from computers. So that's not plastics, but definitely in the metal space.
So it does seem like people are working on it. You are accurate in your pessimism. But really, I hope that what you all took away is that there are 9 incredible companies based here in New York and beyond working on some hard problems with some really interesting solutions, and that being in New York is the best.
Yes.